Do we have to change our opinion on the new elite specs after testing it in the beta event? This is what we want to answer today. At least I want to give you my take on this question here in a form of a tier list, of course. Yes, in 2 tier lists actually. Let me know your takes in the comments down below. As always, special shout out to all my dear supporters and new to Twitch and Patreon that help me keep the lights on. And now let's start with the disclaimer. As always, this is my opinion. This is a very subjective take, of course. The left tier list here is about how fun I think the spec is, how it feels. I don't talk about the fantasy of it because that's something very personal and very subjective. I talk about fun, how fun it feels. So the fun of the gameplay loop and stuff. I already made a video before we got the beta event, before we could test them, and just my opinion, and this is what you can see on the left. So I will alter it depending on my experiences during the beta. And then on the right side we have how much of a rework it needs. So how much help does it need? How important would it be to change some stuff up for the elite specs? Because some of them feel a little bit less strong, less useful, less fleshed out than others. So this is what is on the right side. Now let's start quickly covering the tiers. So on the left side, like I said, this is about fun and how I like the gameplay loop and how it feels. Of course, style feels just somewhat like not that interesting, and I would not play it if it wouldn't be broken, for example. Then you have somewhat boring, which is, so to say, saying it's okay, but it doesn't feel that fun and interesting to me as other elite spec that we already have. Then we have good, which is like a good spot in my opinion. Yeah, makes sense, obvious that this is where elite specs should be, or even better in very cool, where you say this is a very nice, interesting gameplay look, a very interesting gameplay design, and maybe very interesting like theory crafting elements in there as well. And then of course on the right side where it comes about the how much like rework potential those specs have. Of course, S means perfect, nothing needs to be reworked. And then you have A tier with almost perfect, so it's just the minor changes that need to be done. Then B needs some help, means that there are actually quite a few changes that need to be improved, but it's not complete garbage. And then you have complete rework where I would say, okay, this is like not working. That is not like criticizing the devs in any means. I'm just saying this is like a constructive criticism. This spec will not be very strong or very fun to play when it comes out in this current state. So this is like not like complete being mean or something. This is just me giving some feedback and saying this needs to be changed. Okay, with that much said, let's start. I always start with the how much help it needs, and then I will go to the fun aspect because I already had that from my previous tier list. Maybe I will alter it. Luminary, in my opinion, I made a video about it and analyzed it, but I think the shroud mechanic is not perfect. There needs to be some kind of intention to stay in there. I think it feels really weird, especially if you're not playing support. I don't know. I think the cast times are too long. I think personally it needs some help. It's definitely like not a complete rework potential. I see the potential that it feels fun to use, but it needs some help. Some traits are also not good. I really think it needs some help with the shroud, especially the profession mechanic feels a little bit like clunky. Maybe make the cast times lower, maybe make more impact and stay in there. Maybe the auto attack needs to be better. I don't know. I think this is definitely needs some help. Is it still somewhat boring? Yeah, I think I would leave it there. I think it's not too interesting to me. I think it feels like a Core Guardian Plus with some shroud skills that you dip in and out. If they would buff the shroud, I could see it being moved up, but because the healer build is actually quite fun. But I still would say it's somewhat boring, to be honest. I still would say like that. Next up we have Ritualist. Ritualist is a spec that was never designed for people like me that like to play really aggressively and having no minions, no AI with them. So I think for people that like that, I think it's actually quite fun. Let's talk about the power level. I think the power level again is actually surprisingly good. Yeah, I think in competitive modes it has a nice power level. I think it's on the bottom of almost perfect. It needs some changes with the traits and needs some changes with the utility skills. But I personally think it does not have to be a high damaging build because you have so much utility, so much tankiness in there. I think it's actually, from a just raw gameplay perspective, I would say it's at the bottom of almost perfect, maybe at the top of needs some help, but I think it's definitely better than Luminary. That much is for sure in how much it works, and it feels not clunky to use. It feels actually quite fun to use. I think it's actually quite good. It has some issues. Like I said, the utility skills feel a little bit boring. And the traits sometimes are not really that important to some of them. So it's not perfect for sure, but it's not bad. And would I say it's better than somewhat boring in terms of fun and how the gameplay loop and stuff looks? No, I think it's actually, was assessing it quite right. It's not for me, it's personal. I think it's not the best like Necromancer spec for sure, but it's definitely not dull. I think it has its usefulness and fun, and I think there's some theory crafting that you can do with this as well. So I think it's good. Next up we have the Troubadour. The Troubadour is, in my opinion, one of the specs that actually is very close to being very strong. It has some issues with the traits, in my opinion. Some of the Grandmaster traits are a little bit weird. So I think it's on top of almost perfect, I would say. From how it looks, I think there is almost nothing that needs to be changed too much. It is very strong in like how it feels, but it's also like, I would say, from a profession mechanic, quite easy fleshed out. It does not have any big issues. I think most of the traits are useful. The utility skills are quite good, and the profession mechanics is working perfectly. I personally think it's actually one of the best fleshed out ones. I think you could make an argument to put it in perfect. I think it's like there needs to be some changes to Troubadour to make it a little bit more balanced, and I think some of the things are. I'm not the biggest fan of cast times on the music instruments, so that's just me. I don't know. I think it's almost perfect at the top of this tier. Would I say it's somewhat boring still? No, I actually would promote it. I would say it's for me it's good. Was playing it and it was way more fun to play than it first looked. It is still not, in my opinion, the best designed elite spec from a just gameplay mechanic and stuff, because I like to have some kind of more active gameplay, instant cast shatters and that kind of stuff. But I definitely see how it's fun to play and interesting mechanic wise, and it's really strong. So I think it's actually in good tier in my opinion. I really think so. Then we have Evoker. Oh boy, this is an interesting one. I think Evoker needs to be somewhat between almost perfect and needs some help. Probably needs some help is the thing where it needs to be, because especially the specialized elements trait, I think this will never work in competitive modes. I made a whole video about it, but I think it needs definitely some help. It's really weird. The numbers are crazy if you play it in PvE, and in PvP it's also really weird, really annoying sometimes. I think it needs some help. It hasn't found its perfect spot yet, and some of the profession mechanics and the traits, they are really not perfect. I think they need some help. I would say in terms of like balancing, in PvE, it's actually very strong in what it wants to be. It can do like a lot of different gameplay loops and stuff. I think it's very good in that regard. It can be a solo build, it can be a group full healer, which is not the craziest thing, but it works. And you can play a quick DPS, you can be a full DPS, you can play Conduit. It's really flexible in that regard. I think it needs some help because some of the traits are really bad. Some of the utility skills, or most of them, are actually not that useful, and if you have not the familiar out of that element, I don't know. It's definitely not there yet with the design of it. Is it fun and very cool? I would say yes and no. I think it's at the bottom of very cool. I might demote it to good, to be honest, because it doesn't change the gameplay loop in crazy extent, but I like the familiar, so I don't know. I think it's for me like in good tier because the traits are actually pulling it a bit down. I think I thought there would be more theory crafting with the traits, but it's almost like you always choose the same ones. Yeah, I will leave it now in good. I'm not too happy with Evoker. Don't get me wrong, I like Evoker and I will definitely play it, but I was a bit more hyped before I played it in the beta, to be honest, because the traits are just, the trait needs some help. It's really the needs some help aspect here is pulling it down. I think if they would have balanced it and made a bit more decisions to improve some of the underused stuff, then it would be very cool still. By the way, if you want to see all my reviews of all those elite specs in a specific video, be sure to check out the link in the description with the playlist, where I have all 9 professions, deep review of all of them, how I think they are working, how they look in the current meta and stuff like that. So be sure to check this out. Now let's talk about the Antiquary. So Antiquary, in my opinion, is from a balance perspective needs some help. That is for sure. Why is that? Because if you have a DPS build that has like a plus minus 5k DPS, depending on if you're lucky or not, that's too much. And in competitive modes, it's really bad, this spec. So I think it needs some help. It's definitely, the traits are interesting from a design perspective, but they are not working in most of the situations. So some of them are really good, some of them are just completely useless. And I think it needs some help. Just generally, it needs some help. It is definitely something that is not perfect. I would definitely say that. Is it still in good tier? I think it's at the bottom of good tier for me because of the inflexibility that you have. It's almost like you are playing a full DPS build in all game modes and that's about it. And in competitive modes that almost doesn't work. And in PvE it's like easy to say this is the build that you have to play, and it feels very similar. You spam your artifacts and that's it. I think it's not bad, don't get me wrong. I think the gameplay design and stuff is actually quite fun because you can alter your artifacts, you can use improvisation and use them quite often and stuff. I think that's quite fun, but it's at the bottom of good tier because of the general inflexibility of the spec. It feels very somewhat clunky as well with some of the cast times and of the artifacts and stuff. So it needs some help. Again, this like the same for Evoker. That's why pulling it a bit down, because it just needs some some help with the general like aspects of the profession mechanic and the traits that make it a little bit clunky. You know, the design itself would be good, but it's pulled down a bit, so it's at the bottom of good, I would say. By the way, if you like this video, be sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more content like this, especially regarding the new Visions of Eternity expansion, be sure to subscribe. But now let's talk about Galeshot. That might be a hot take, but I think Galeshot is the only spec for now that is imperfect. Why is that? Because it has almost everything that you want in the kit. I think it's very like clear, fleshed out. I think maybe I have to demote it because of the traits. Some of the traits are very PvP focused and you would only take them PvP. So I think it's the highest of almost perfect, because it needs some help in terms of like how the traits are useful, because in PvP and world versus world, and especially in PvE, some of the traits say I've never used it, it's just not good enough. So I think some of the traits and some of the interactions with the profession mechanic could be improved, but I actually think it's currently in this 6 specs, I think it's actually the best one, that is the best like fleshed out and works the most. Maybe even perfect, we will see. This is what I take. I think I would still leave it in very cool in terms of fun. It has definitely a combo potential that I thought it has. There's very nice damage, very nice burst. It's fun to play. I think it fills this fantasy of an archer perfectly. I think it's perfect in terms of like how fun it is, and that's how new elite specs should be in my opinion. Very cool, very fun. It's good. I like it. Amalgam is very power crept. It's like insane how much overpowered it is in all game modes. So I will leave that like to balance for sure. But in terms of like how the profession mechanic works, how the morph skills work, how the utility skills work, it's actually also quite good. It's also very good, to be honest, how well balanced it is. All of them have a usage. It's very interesting to theory craft with it. I actually think Amalgam is really fun. I know some people dislike the spec design and stuff, but I personally think how the traits interact and stuff is actually really good. So again, it's at the highest of almost perfect. Maybe those two have to be on perfect, because if you compare to Troubadour and Ritualist, I think those two are definitely lower than those two. So maybe let's leave it like that, and I don't know. Nothing is really perfect. There are still some changes that actually need improvement. Would I say Amalgam is still very cool? For sure. Why is that? Because it has amazing build crafting. I think some of the skills, some of the traits are not perfect, yes, but most of them are really good, and I have so many different builds in mind that I can try out with Amalgam, so it's actually really fun. That's the most interesting aspect for me. That's why it's very cool for me, and it stays there. And then actually, I did not plan that, but I have the 2 specs last that are actually in Daltian. Let's see if we will stick with this. So let's start with Paragon. I personally think Paragon is filling its job as a full supporter. In my opinion, it needs some help. Why is that? The core warrior is providing all the boons, is providing all the heals. The Paragon itself is like just something that alters core warrior a bit. It's really like, it needs some help. I think if you wanted to play as a full DPS, it needs a lot of help. And if you want to play it as a spec that is actually a full support, then I think it only works because of the core warrior traits. Is that a problem? Not necessarily, but I think it needs some help with the traits and the utility skills, and maybe make the meditation, or how it's called, the chants, a little bit more interesting as well. I think in general it needs some help. In competitive modes it's actually quite fun. I like to play it. In PvE it's very spammy and also very strong. I like to play it there as well, but I can definitely see that it is like a core warrior. I really think that that's not good enough. I think Paragon needs some help in terms of like making it a little bit more interesting in terms of just how it feels. Yeah, I personally think it needs some help there in that regard. Is it dull? I actually have to be honest. The thing that is dull for me is that it has almost no animations. But because of the gameplay loop, and it's actually quite fun to play for me, I played it a lot in PvP as a support and it was really fun. I played it a lot in the golem area and tested the limit of it, and it has really good like healing output, really good boon output. I actually promote it now to somewhat boring only, because it is still not the most interesting spec for me, because it does not have any animations. The build crafting is like almost zero, because you always play it as a support. So it's still somewhat boring, but it is not dull anymore, because you really feel the gameplay flow is really fun. You have a lot of, you spam your channel and you really want to get some kind of fast-paced gameplay, and it's really fun to me to play and not that hard to learn. Sometimes it's a high skill ceiling for the echo skills and stuff, but other than that, it's actually quite strong. So I actually like this in terms of fun aspect. I think it got some promotion there, but it needs definitely some help. Like I said, it is not perfectly balanced for sure. And then we have lastly, we have Conduit. And what can I say? it is for me the weakest spec. It needs the most rework potential. Don't get me wrong, the numbers are okay, but how it feels, it's just bad. I think it's not the most fun spec. It needs a complete rework in my opinion, or at least some crazy addition that makes it more interesting, because I think Rasa is such a cool idea. I was so hyped. It's such a flexible idea for Revenant. It's perfect, but it doesn't fill that promise. You know, it's like it doesn't like do anything of that, and it's just like a core Revenant with a little bit of a different gameplay loop. I really think it needs a complete rework of the profession mechanic. Yes, I know there are some builds in competitive modes that are really strong, but I think it's still not, it needs some help. It's something that makes it stand out, something unique. That's why I think it's the worst one and it needs a complete rework. Is it still dull? Yeah, sadly it is. Why is that? Because the profession mechanic is almost non-existent. That's the thing. So that's why it still stays in dull. And I will not change that if there is nothing like coming other than just boons. I really hope there is some new profession mechanic coming or making the boons way more interesting. A lot of boons in the spec would help it so that it's not dull anymore, maybe, but I think it's still somewhat dull. So that's just my take. Let me know yours in the comments down below. You can see it's a nice spread in terms of fun, I would say. In terms of balancing, of course, I did not put anything in perfect because I'm someone that says, there's always something they could improve. But I would say Amalgam and Galeshot could easily go in perfect if you are a little bit more want to give them the benefit of doubt. But I think those two are better than those two. In general, you can see some of them need help, and a complete rework is only needed for Conduit, I would say. So yeah, this is my tier list, or both tier lists. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. If you now are convinced to purchase Visions of Eternity because you tried it in the beta and you like all the specs or you like the ones that you want to play, be sure to use my referral link if you want to support me with no additional cost. Thanks a lot for watching. Thanks again to all my supporters, and I hope to see you all in the next video.